Thank you. Good morning. Thanks to everybody to making it in this morning. I do appreciate the compliment, and I hope you had a great night last night. All righty. Better. The talk today is obviously incident response, whether it's 100 or 101. Depends how much detail we want to go into and how many questions you have for me. If anybody has any questions about the dog, this is a convention I went to last year held coincidentally in rooms 23 and 23B down in San Diego. Anyway, this is from across the street with a zoom lens. I was really happy to get anything at all, let alone a dog dancing in the water. So, sorry. Wow. My backstory on incident response is that I failed, and that's to say I did a good job when they asked me to come up with an incident response plan for our team. My background is our team is governance and security. We take on some operational roles, and do just about everything else that needs to be done in a corporation. It's a specialty group. We've got a lot of skill sets in our group, but it's a very small group. I did a good job preparing the incident response plan for our team, and now it's the corporate incident response plan. Be careful what you do well. Yeah, now I get to make up scenarios, so all those years of playing Dungeons and Dragons as the GM makes me the guy who comes up with all the scenarios to run the whole corporation. So you never thought that would have come in handy. So I thought that this would be a good talk. Amongst those I listed, as was picked out, hey, this would be a good one for our audience, since a lot of you have done well in corporations and are now asked to do more. And I am hoping, as you're moving up and proving your worth to corporations, that this does help you. That's my intent. This is a process of discovery for me. I've taken and built on the shoulder of giants, as I hope is a reasonable approach. Another reason I'm talking on this is I actually care about the topic. It's engaging to me, and I've seen too much in my prior history in IT and information security, risk assessment, and risk management to say, you know, that's not something you can just leave off. In fact, if there's anything I'm going to focus on for this topic, it's preparation. If you don't prepare, I'll beat this in over the whole talk, but if you don't prepare, your response will fail. You've got such a slim chance of success that it's virtually nothing. You need, when you instantiate your program, to talk. So let me go through each of these. In preparation, it's not just writing out the plan. You've got to establish what you need. You have to establish your expectations, particularly with your stakeholders and everyone else who's going to come banging on your door when something happens, wanting to know what's going on. You need executive buy-in. You need to know who the other players are in the corporation. A lot of this is outside of our normal technical LCD-facing experience. We need to go out, and we really need to be social animals, or, because this is not something that can be done by one person, we need to be part of a team and understand who in the team really has those social skills and can socialize things and manage them. If management is not your strong point and you don't want to move there, find someone who does, and make sure you've got a partner to be able to do that. Once you've established this, you want to form the plan, the processes, the documents, those artifacts that you're going to retain as you go through an incident and as you go through the resolution for the incident, where you figure out what actually went wrong and you bring it back into your other business processes. Business processes drive incident response because you need to know in your risk management program what failed and what didn't we account for before, or is that something we did account for and we just need to tally off another thing saying, yeah, it's more likely to happen. It happened in the past if you're using actuary data and all that. Tie it into your IT ops, tie it into your security ops, tie it into those things where your feedback from an incident response, make sure that you have fewer of them to wake you up on a Sunday morning with. Thank you for coming to the talk. Did I mention that? Finally, the plan, the program, which is where you're hopefully heading. It's not just a dead paper set of documents, you know, about an inch thick that describes everything you need to do. Your program is an ongoing thing in the company, and you need to continually improve upon it. Not just a response to an incident, but the plan itself. If it doesn't work, if it's too cumbersome, or if it leaves things out, you have to identify those things. Improve the plan as well. We'll go into each of these. First, the establish. I'm going to beat this one to death. It's going to be front-loaded for the slides, guys. When you're setting up, if you've been asked to take responsibility for incident response within whatever size organization, you need to be able to go to that stakeholder or stakeholders or board or whoever's giving you this authority and make sure that responsibility you're taking on is matched with the authority. If you don't have a balance, you're going, again, to fail. If you're asked to do too much with too little, or if you're given too much and not enough responsibility, you'll find that things get out of whack very quickly. You need to set expectations with your stakeholders, and this is before anything else comes up. And you need to iron out the details. First, I realize I need to step back a second. This talk is how to establish or build upon incident response when you're the one or within the group taking responsibility for that. I won't go into technical detail. There is no technical detail in the talk. There is my experiences setting this up. I'll go into very lightly the actual procedures you might use, but I won't be detailing them. You'll need to tailor those to your organization and to the needs you have as a group and the resources you've been given, which ties back into this initial preparation. You need to be able to understand what it is you have. Are you going to be given a budget? Are you going to be directly managing a team or a member of a large team, a small team? No team at all will you be pulling responders and subject matter experts out of your IT, your security, your HR, and all the other groups that help in a response. You need to know where your resources are. You need to identify this with your stakeholders when you start. And that may be an iterative process, but until you announce the capability for incident response, you need to get that ironed out and before you announce that capability. Or again, you won't be prepared and you'll fail. The expectations go both ways. It's very important not only to say, what are you giving me, but identify proactively, which will really help build this relationship with your sponsors, what you're giving back. When we have an incident, you're going to know within 10 minutes what we know, and once we've fixed or once we've contained the problem, you're going to know that. You're going to know every stage along the way, and once we're done, you're going to get a summary report that you can read and understand. That's, oh yeah. I think the comment from the audience was, you're going to need a budget, you're going to know what it's coming back out. Yeah, that final report needs to include the impact from the incident and the costs you expended under the authority you were given to drive the incident response. So they're going to want to know what the impact is. They might even ask for the unreasonable, in my opinion, which is an estimation of what it would have happened if you didn't respond, which is a guess, to say politely. But all of these sort of things you may need to know who in your team has good skills with the books, estimating risk and responsibility, estimating costs financially. With the executives, they also really need to have that feedback, bring to them, hopefully without them having to ask, both setting the expectation and delivering as you get into this, what they're going to receive. You will build a much stronger relationship and you'll be able to do your job. Because once they start having to micromanage again, you'll have too few resources to deal with the guy on your back as well as the incident in front of you. Then you need to create a draft plan. This is part of setting expectations with your stakeholders. You need to be able to say, here's about what we're going to do. Don't spend all your time on this. It's an iterative process. Give them something that they can identify, find reasonable, and sign off on so that you can get your final approval. That draft plan is a good thing to start with within architecture. I've got several resources at the end of the talk. Particularly the NIST IR stuff is very good. There are others all over the internet. Use a critical eye, but mostly use a critical eye for how can this affect and help your organization. Identifying resources is another part of that. Setting expectations, what you have, what you can have, do you need to go hire? And spending your time on this is very important when you do this. You can't just go hire bodies. Every responder will be critical in your response. You need to know you've got somebody who has the skills necessary, and one of those skills is going to be domain knowledge of your organization. I'll get more to that, but it's critical that you have team members you draw from your organization. Even if they don't have the technical or analytical skills, you need to be able to do that. And finally, you get all this in front of your stakeholders, and you're going to be able to say, hey, here's what we're going to do. You know, we're going to make sure this happens. Make sure you include that you're going to improve upon it, because that puts in your clause for making things happen right and not to a dead paper document. Here's where I'll go in and take questions for, okay, we'll start with that.
Just real quick, I think in the last one you were missing one crucial step.
All right.
Which is defining what an incident in your organization actually is.
Very good question. Question was, how do you define incidents within your organization? And yeah, that's actually been critical for us as well. Often the audit people will be the first to bring it up, or well, at least it was for us. That's a very difficult task. It's actually a question I'd pose back to each of you. It's the one I was asked, which is, okay, what are we going to do? What is going to happen? In my opinion, you cannot know, and I've approached this with an architectural model where I try to handle all the eventualities. That's, I hope, not too much of a cop-out. I tried to make something that you can apply in the, I do understand your question very deeply, I'm afraid. Defining what your incidents are is going to be important. For the purposes of this talk, I'm focused on security incidents and information security incidents. That's everything from when someone picks up a ream of paper that's got PII on it and walks out the door, to malware outbreaks in the infrastructure, to an attack and a success in a DMZ, what have you. Information security in this case is what I'm talking to. And do you have any more questions in detail on that point? I'm afraid I'm going to outline it here. No? Okay. Happy to talk after the talk on that one. There's a lot of backstory. So, an overall, yeah, Riverside.
You were going back to the other slide with loading resources and trying to get all the people in the organization that would be handling the response. Went through the 861 Rev 2 doc from NIST and built a whole bunch of plans. Did something very similar. And
all right.
I find that the things that need to be done and the people that are there, there's a gap. And so have you found a way to front load or push into your plan that these positions need to be filled and you need these resources, and then bring it forward so that they can actually fill that? Or are you just trying to make do with what you have?
Yes, we did take that into account. One word, consultants. I'll get into it when we get more into the resources, but if, as part of setting your expectations, you need to establish where you'll need consultants. You won't have a database forensics guy who's got 20 years experience on your team unless you're a very large corporation or government agency. And then you might need a couple. So, I'm sorry.
Just one quickie. With regards to gathering information, do you recommend using a wiki? And if so, how much of this information should really be confidential?
Your incident response plan and overall architecture shouldn't necessarily be confidential. When you're handling an incident, you actually do need to operate on a need-to-know basis. Let me, I believe you mean when you're using a wiki for, in the process of incident response, then let me get to a little further on, but the short answer is I would not use an automated process as the front end for your incident response program. In the one we formed, we rely on several key roles, people who make decisions and front end the process. In this case, that would be the incident response manager or coordinator who would get the people up to date on what's going on, communicate it to them through whatever necessary channel is to be used or not to be used if it is a sensitive issue, and bringing that in, bringing them in that way, managing the process. Is that a question?
I've worked with a couple different organizations that have used wikis and ticketing systems for managing incidents. We found it very useful with the incident manager, making sure information gets put in there, and then, because we're human, we'll forget things, but also for data mining that and making correlations to different IPs, different domains, and so forth that we didn't actually initially see during our analysis. So it did help putting it all together and then being able to run some scripts and data mine and make correlations. So, but based on your question, the places I've been to, we had our wiki basically separated from anything else on the network. Within our incident management room, we had our war room, as it were, and didn't have it anywhere outside, so we didn't necessarily need to worry about any confidentiality issues or anything in that sense, because the only people that were allowed in that room were the incident team and the handful of folks that were supporting us.
That's a bit like how we approach it. I'm a little architecture agnostic in this. I would suggest, strongly suggest, that you move toward automation and record keeping in the incident response. Because yes, that's if you aren't recording what's going on, you won't be able to do proper resolution and evaluate your own IR plan once you've formed it, once you've used it.
Big assumption there that the incident doesn't affect your wiki system.
Yeah, the IR team may eventually find an incident where they are affected. More likely, it will be the email system doesn't work. The phone systems are down. Somebody backhoe attacked both LC12s coming out of a supposedly reliable data center, whatever that might be. But yeah, you also need a backup failover, paper process. And when developing your plan, you should make those two match. I'm stealing from all of my later slides, but it's I very gleefully pulled our incident response archive documents, the key data that we're going to record in each phase. Let me get started on that after this, where the archive documents, the paper process is actually what we will capture in a real incident response, and they look the same as our litigation support process because we had a well-established, well-ironed-out, mature process that everyone on our team already knew. So we're leveraging not only something that takes me 5 minutes to steal, but also everybody else who already knows it can come in as a responder and recognize, oh, this is where we are, this is what we need to do. You get leverage in the infrastructure and in the people's minds who are helping you with your response by making things correlate between those things they already know. And you get the additional response of actually solidifying a perhaps not as often used process that they do know. They can go back to, in this case, litigation support, and say, "Oh yeah, I know where I am here too," because they just did 3 incidents. Hopefully not, but maybe. So, in my model, we've got preparation. I think I'm almost done beating it. No, I'm not. If you're at your preparation, you've got to get everything ironed out first. Pardon me. Triage is a term I'm not terribly happy with. It comes from the necessity to establish those who are going to die anyway, those who are dying who you can save, and those who aren't going to die, but we use it. It's not really completely a good analog to what's going on, but you need to identify first when you're going into your incident response, is this an incident or is this another operational issue that the trouble ticketing system is going to handle and get ironed out by IT ops, physical ops, whoever you, or whatever the incident is going to, the issue is going to be handled by. Has to be fast. You have to identify who's going to do it, who the question is asked to, and how you do all the communication up to that person or that role when it comes up. Is it a security issue? Is it a security incident? Because at that point, you also may have to take it, behind the curtain and say, okay, yeah, we'll fix it. Don't worry. Shut up, please. We'll take care of the problem. Containment is your first real phase. This is this triage, containment, and triage and containment are the emergency phases. This is when you're scrambling to understand the problem, communicate what you know, and containing the incident, stopping whatever badness is happening from becoming more bad, because badness is bad. You need to do whatever it is that you need to get done here. Again, I can handle a couple of hypotheticals if you like, but it's limiting the scope of the impact at hand, the bad things that are going on. With each of these phases, you've got they all address a very specific need, and you have to continue to work towards that need before you move on. If you don't, you may end up botching your response. For containment, it's Can we get to a point where this is no longer a direct and imminent or ongoing threat to the organization, systems, infrastructure, people, what have you? Once you've got containment handled, we move on to response. Here's where you take a considered approach. When you've got the time to sit back, give your staff time, 8 hours to sleep, come back in and say, what really went wrong here? Is it that our firewall rules were misconfigured and the stuff just walked right in the front door? Is it somebody walked right in a front door with a USB thumb drive? Or whatever the problem may have been, fix your infrastructure. The impact may be measured in financial terms. Your fix may be measured in changes to business process or recommendations to do the same. It's the time where you take and say, here's what we've got. Here's what really caused it. You may come up with a root cause analysis at this point. You may do that later in resolution. But the response is, how do we fix this? And that may end up spinning up a project to do so. Identify with the proper groups where you need to go from here to fix this once you've already contained the problem. The overall resolution is once you've resolved the issue, you do need to approach and discuss the overall problem. If you've got poor management controls on changes and your change management process is actually faulty, you need to go and identify that, not necessarily fix it. When you're talking about the core issues, you're usually talking about an expansion of scope that's well beyond what you may be chartered for incident response. You're not responding to the incident anymore, but you are describing its cause. And that is as important as containing it often because you'll be containing it for all future incidents. You need to be able to communicate that not just to your stakeholders, not just to the people who have sponsored you, but to the impacted parties so they know, hey, you're doing your job. Somebody's thinking about not just what just happened, but not having it happen again because they're going to be leery of the whole topic of whatever process, personnel, or infrastructure just failed. And you got to give them confidence in that again so they can build on it when you've fixed it to go on with business, go on with life. And you need to get that also out to those who may actually be charged with fixing the problem. They're going to need to have the recommended plan and whoever sign off, however you motivate those people to do it, whether it's a political or a directive or simply guidance that your group signs off on in hopes that somebody does a good job. Resolution is also where you evaluate your plan. Was your plan successful? Where did you have hiccups? You will. The most mistakes will happen in an incident response, even a well-prepared one, because people are woken up at 3 a.m. and on the phone and they don't recognize the person's voice. They think it's Chuck and not Harry. They go off and do something that doesn't make much sense. They may even add to the problem. Even with well-intentioned, well-established, and mature plans, you're going to have a lot of mistakes. You have to record them. And it shouldn't be held as an indictment against those responders, those subject matter experts, those members of your team or outside of your team. But you've got to be able to record these things and you've got to be able to communicate them clearly. If that means limiting the scope or passing off drafts, or requests for comments throughout your organization when you do your resolution summary and detailed reports, depending on what you need, you've got to be able to communicate those things to the people who need to hear it first. And maybe it doesn't go in the final report, maybe it does, but you've got to communicate through that. If it's an informal means of doing that, that works too, but it really is a requirement there. You've got to be able to fix your own process. If you didn't have a backup plan for this, that, or the other thing, come up with one. Take what you've already got, make it redundant, available, or something that's just based on a different technology, different medium, different connectivity, whatever you need there. Tie up your loose ends and move on. This is a big one. The first point is roles are not people. This will go to resource management too, but you can't say, this is Bob, here's your incident response plan. Bob just got hit by a bus, you now have an incident. Yeah, and you've got to identify that roles have to be maintained the responsibilities of a role have to be maintained and acted upon by people who are capable of doing it. You have to staff to your roles, not the other way around. Don't just throw the person under the bus who's really good at everything that could go wrong, except their communication skills aren't top-notch and they don't really think well on the fly. They're definitely the right person to have in your response group. Really a good subject matter expert, perfect for using as a resource and putting it in a console. But if they can't communicate, oh, this controller fails, we're looking at a problem in the other 3 environments just like this, and making the correlation, communicating it back, you've got to make sure your roles requirements are set. Make sure your role is also probably staffed in the process you establish. And you're going to have some subject matter experts in your team that are going to define roles as well, but it's usually making those roles match what the business requirements are, what your objective response is going to be. If you've got a legacy application that's, I don't know, a mainframe back end with a Perl front end for the web, you probably have 2 people there that are the subject matter expert, but only together. The roles as we've implemented them are the ones you see on the screen. The incident coordinator is your project manager. They're the person who is going to say what's going on. They're going to be recording it. They're going to making sure that when one of your responders calls in and says, this is what I'm doing, they'll check back in 30 minutes to see if they're done, see what the response was. If somebody simply goes offline, isn't there, isn't available, isn't answering calls, they're the ones who need to go through and say to the manager, the incident manager, hey, we got to pull from the next tier, the tier 2. Your fallback plan is now, the time is now. They have to be focused on what it is next and what just happened. They're also your repository for all your information. If they're interfacing with a wiki, this is the person who's going to be typing like crazy. They need to be pulled from a pool, and you need to have people who are capable and understand the plan. If anybody on the team understands all the requirements and all the checkboxes, it's going to be your incident coordinator. The incident manager is the person who has to make calls. He's the one, he or she is the one that is going to be the one who knows the executives, knows their sponsors, knows what they have to get done, and marshals all of the responses. Whether it's sending a responder out, whether it's calling in the subject matter experts, the right ones, or whether it's stopping business because any further operations would be more detrimental to the company than otherwise, or telling the execs that that's what needs to happen depending on how much authority they're given. They're the ones who make the authority calls and use the big stick when necessary. They're the ones who really run the show. And they can't be the ones at the console. In fact, neither the coordinator or the manager can be the ones at the console. They cannot be responders. They have to also keep the executives who are going to be clawing at the door to know what's going on at the door and not on somebody else's back. They have to be the ones to say, we will have that for you in 15 minutes as soon as we know and can make sure that we have what we know correct. Your incident responders are the feet who hit the ground and start running. They need to be able to do so maybe without too much direction, and they need to be able to do what they do well. They have to be capable, well informed on the incident response plan as well. They're going to be the ones who need to know, what do I go and do and come back with? How do we handle this and come back and get the job done and get to our next phase? Subject matter experts are the people you call in. They're the ones who are going to know all your infrastructure. The hammer of God is not one that's going to be in your plans, but that's most likely your stakeholder, if not another executive. This person is one you have to have a very well-established relationship with, but they're the ones who are going to clear it out when you have the political problem or the massive expenditure that you have to do or the stoppage of business or the shutting down of tech center floor right now before the fire suppression kicks in and floods it. You call these guys in, the incident manager will call these in and call these guys up and say, this is exactly what's happening, and here's exactly how I need your help, and here's why, when they ask, not if. And you can't do that, and certainly not in every response sort of thing, not in every response sort of role. It's something that's going to be, now what do we do? When something goes well beyond the responsibilities and authority placed in your incident response plan, that's who you call, and they have to be the ones able to fix it. Politics will take place in this, but a response has to take politics aside because we're really talking about high costs to the company. And that leads right into resource management. I've mentioned enough. If you have staff, you have to have enough staff. If you have to have skill sets, it's great if you build your team around people with duplicate skill sets. Maybe they're not all top-notch, but if one guy really knows his database skills, another guy can be happy enough with SQL not to know drop table. Yeah, thank you. It's going to be the team you build, both the responders, the subject matter experts. You have to know where your skill sets are deep, because vacation is a horrible thing to waste. And people after 8 hours will begin making not just some, but more mistakes. If you've come to work and you're already working an incident and you've got 12 guys on it and that's your whole IR team, and another one comes up, send 8 of them home right now. You've got 2 incidents of 4 guys, but if they've already been working 8 hours, you're going to need them all to work 2 incidents in the morning, obviously with whatever's going on, but that may not be bad guidance. You've got to realize that you're managing resources, not just humans' time, but their capacity to deliver. But also, you're handling situations where you don't have enough time. To answer the earlier question, when you don't have enough feet on the ground, when you don't have enough boots, or when that one subject matter expert is out, you have to be prepared and already have contractual and NDA obligations with the consultancies you know who can deliver for you in the flight time it takes to get their guys there. And of course, you have to have the authority to call those in or get somebody to sign the check, because you're going to need them. As I mentioned, our group also does litigation support. We're not a large group. We do way too many things as it is. We do them effectively because when we have a problem that we know our resources can't match, we call the consultants. I know there are mixed feelings about what consultants can do for you. I know some of you are consultants. You know, if you have something you do really well, let me know. It's that you need to be able to call those people and get them where they need to be as soon as possible, and you already have to have those roles, those relationships established. Budget is obviously resource management. IR budget, just like you can't predict when the next incident will happen. Statisticians might say you can do it it will happen twice in the next 6 months. Good luck with those sort of gambles. There's another convention coming up. It's in Vegas. Yeah, you have to be able to work with the funds you have, know what you can and cannot do, but don't throw everything at every problem, because there will, or just may, be another. Work to get a good understanding of risk management as well before the incident comes along. Time is a resource. Manage it well. It's not just about driving to containment. Of course that's it. But if at the end of the day everyone goes home, you've got a 5x8 shop, and the incident effectively stops mitigation, and you've got 2 of them going on, pull support from one. If it's not going to happen, if you're at or near containment, or just need a few more hours, get it done when it needs to be. If all your SMEs are going to go home anyway, sometimes you don't have the authority to compel. Use that sort of time management as well, calendar time as well as humans time. What's up?
Regarding budget, if you have a limited budget, where do you see the most bang for the buck? What would you spend the most money on in your IR plan, or with resource in mind?
Is this a softball, Riverside? It's preparation. Establish first where you can, and you will absolutely need the capabilities to go after something in the future. In incident response is one of the few times I really do believe that it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission. And if the company understands that this is an incident and they already know you're resource constrained, you may already have or work out the authority to do that. You do need some in reserve. Usually you want to cover, you want to leave it in reserve and mark it for contract. That's what I'd recommend. But by the way, for the audience, I am not the director of our group. I don't sign checks. I don't authorize them. I'm trying to come up with a model and recommend it to that person. So the question may not be fully recognized by my experience. Work within your management team, or if you are management, use your best judgment. I almost forgot a couple of things on that I want to point out. It's not just all doom and gloom for resource management. Look other places, not just, I mentioned I stole the the litigation support processes right out from under that and used them for our incident response, tailored them, of course. Look to your DR guys. They probably have an alerting system for tracking their employees and where they are for your incident response. See if you can leverage it. If you're in charge of costs and budgets, see if you can share the costs with them. You may make them very, very happy. Also a good way to build relationships. If you aren't already the risk management or governance or SecOps team, look to them. They are going to need your resolution phase analysis for their risk management program. But they're also where you're going to get some of the best SMEs for security incident response. There is going to be a two-way street there. Build it, work it. It is part of resource management. On communication, yeah, okay, I've flooded this slide with info. Don't try to read all of them. But recognize you have to establish relationships with a huge number of people because they are, in whatever happens, suddenly going to be coming out of the woodwork and very important to you. And if you've never spoken to them before yourself, you're going to end up having to make that call, and you get somebody up at 4 in the morning, you're going to have to say your name 4 times and the company you work for. Yes, it's the same as them, 5, if you're calling them at 3 a.m. Key and critical is, of this list, legal, press PR, executive, board, and HR. They're the first on the list for a reason. Those are going to be involved in your incident response at some phase. And IT ops, security ops as well, of course, depending on what's going on. Also, don't stop reading if you are going through the whole list. Your industry groups. The corporation I work for is in financial services. Yes, we still exist. There are several ISACs. We definitely work with the FS ISAC, the Financial Services ISAC, for just coordinating. We may find that they are doing something better. Steal it. Use it. Open this has been going on for some time, and there are people with nice, mature processes. They may not exactly work for you. Always use that critical eye, but if they've got something that they've got proven and working, it's worth a look. It's worth a couple of hours of time reading, even if it is their dead tree stuff. And, of course, the consulting companies. I think I'm almost done beating up on that one. Communication is one thing. Not communicating is another very important variable. When you identify a security incident, somebody's going to get fired. Somebody's going to lose their job, be demoted, be written up. Somebody may go to jail. You need to control who gets access to what's going on. That's in our plan anyway, that's the role of the incident manager and the incident coordinators and the executives who will probably be interested as to what's going on there. You need to operate on need to know, and people need to understand that. When you socialize this, they need to understand when it's a security incident, it goes to this group, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. Heck, sell it as a positive if you can. Once it goes into security incident response, it's need to know, and you need to have the well-established processes out, not just to those inside your group. The incident responders are already going to know this. It should be intuitive to them, but to the subject matter experts, they don't go home and tell their drinking buddies, who are also all coworkers, about what happened today at the office. And that's during your training and your testing. I use a maturity model to drive this out. Testing is key for us anyway. We go through twice yearly or once quarterly, depending, our incident response plans. I come up with scenarios now. I mentioned the DMing. It's got to be intrinsic and founded in the response. Question?
What's your opinion on sharing an actual incident information with various other incident responders who are on the same team but may not have been actively working on that specific incident?
Depends on the issue. That's an easy one. That's a call. If it isn't directly relevant to them as to what happened, but it's definitely part of the learning process. So within the team, at least for us, and financial services and all that sort of thing, we do things differently than government. We don't have too many Chinese walls. Yeah, I would share it. I might not share details. I might redact names. I say, hey, here we're going to go through our semi-monthly upgrade to the incident response plan, and here's the things we're doing differently, and here's why, but we don't go into why. That's how I'd handle it. If it's sensitive, it needs to be taken care of. Done a good job of just identifying who does need to know. They definitely need to know what happened in an incident, and you've got to have a lot of trust in your IR team. So I would share it. I might redact names. Short answer.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. The last one I have on here is don't idly chat. You need that time anyway. That should be obvious. But chatting around the water cooler is not a good idea. Keep it to the offices and keep that information under wraps because you're going to need it. I'll give you an example. You have to know those people out in the field that you're dealing with, and they have to know that expectation. At one point, we had an incident to deal with, and I had to ask that a particular systems administrator go out, pull these 3 systems, hard drives, pack them up that day, FedEx them overnight. Pretty simple. We do that on occasion. And he seemed somehow reticent. I was talking to him on the phone, and I said, okay, well, we need to get this done. He's like, why? Well, I can't really discuss the matter with you. I do need to see those things done. We've got the approval. We've notified the IT director, the IT manager. You're the direct report. This is how it works. He's like, well, one's my wife. Yeah, you're going to get hit with stuff like that, and I don't really know if there is a good way to handle the situation at that point. But it's going to happen, and you need to be sensitive to it. I don't know if it was discussed, and luckily for us, actually the confidentiality in that situation turned out not to be important, which was a great relief. But you've got to be very careful with how you communicate, both as widely as necessary and as tightly as needed. I'm sorry, question?
Even to expand also on your point, even
to expand on your point, even with some managers, you have to be very careful.
Oh, definitely.
With what you tell them. The
Definitely.
benchmark on the individual who asked a question earlier, in our incident management process, we have what we call a hot wash. So after the end of it, for some of our bigger incidents, we'll get people together and give them a briefing, and we'll clean it up so that it doesn't mention people's names, server names, IP addresses, or anything like that, but it just kind of give them the whole overview of this is what happened, this is why it happened, and this is the steps we need to take to prevent it from happening in the future.
I'd agree, and I'd even add to your briefing, you might want to include where things shouldn't be discussed. These are legal matters at this point. And usually, if you say this is a legal or HR matter, managers know their ass is on the line if they do discuss it, at least in those circles in which I work. So I mentioned a maturity model. There are many out there. I use this one, 5 steps, 10 steps, 3 steps. Simple is not a bad thing. Informal, that's where you are now if you don't know. If you don't know, you are that guy. Don't be that guy. That guy is the regulators write up on their reports. You get fired. If it's your responsibility to do incident response, that's it. You don't want to be that guy. It's not really all that funny. Documented is the dead tree approach. The war on trees continues. That's where you come up with it, you print it out, you maybe put it on a website and say, these are policy documents, here's the incident response plan. No one reads it, everyone signs off on it blindly. You have to go there first though. Iron it out, get it set. Get it set in a format where you can make changes, because you will. You absolutely will. It'll be too general, too specific, not handle all of the situations you had in mind when you outlined it. Established is where you're really actually using it. You've gotten your buy-in from your executives. Your sponsors say, go. You've documented it. You've got it all signed off. You actually have incident response capability here. Get there when you can, as soon as you can, and you can be able to deliver. But next step is to test it. Though you will be tested anyway, and you have to be ready for that eventuality, you need to test on a regular basis. There's a lot of reasons for this. Your staff and this wonderfully deep set of dedicated incident response team you have at your command, you lucky bastards, is going to need rotation. If certain guys haven't trained up on certain types of incidents you're pretty well going to expect are going to happen, Maybe your risk management team is telling you, these are the problems we're not going to fix in the next 3 years. You might want to set up your response for these. Do the testing. Do it on a regular basis. Don't allow incidents to take the place of testing, because I guarantee your ability to improve your response program is diminished. When you're really driving to respond to a real incident, the review and even the notes you're taking for how you do incident response will be, you're not going to get 20% of the value. When you're doing a test, that's where you get a lot of that value. And that's how you make sure the next incident that you're prepared for it. You will be tested under fire. You don't want to always be tested under fire, because you won't know. Everyone will literally have their nose in the mud, dragging a trench until they know how high they can get up the ground and move a lot faster to the destination. Integrated. Your wiki, your workflow process, the things that can bring this in and save you time. Yes, it is any automation is a crutch when it goes away, but for those incidents that don't affect your group, this is going to save you time, make you more effective, make you better to do standard delivery. That's going to help you an immense amount, and it helps codify your process. It helps establish the process. People who come in can go through a training module in that process, perhaps, and come onto the team quickly, easily, and able to come and deliver. The last phase is, of course, the Holy Grail. I hope you get there. That's a mature process. When you've acculturated the process, people, when you pick up the phone, maybe even recognize your voice. And they know if you're calling them at 3 a.m., they better go get a cup of coffee if they have time. That's where people you hear talking about your last incident response scenario in the break room. Not just the break room for your team, but like in that floor's break room. That's where the people who are going to be involved, whether you're your team or outside of your team, the subject matter experts, take an interest in and understand it. It doesn't have to be the delight of their day, but they have to hopefully know that when you call, you're fixing a problem that's going to otherwise slap them a little harder upside the head. Move through those. And another note on these. I did spend some time. This may seem like a very simple list. But if you don't achieve each in sequence, you will have huge gaps. If you don't have a tested process, your integrated solution that you just pay those consultants $500,000 to develop is going to have so many flaws it'll be useless. Test it, work it out first. Make sure you really get the exercise in there and break up the stuff that might be holding it back. Simplify wherever possible. And what I have for you at the end. Drive to your goals. Keep an eye on why is what I mean when I say, or rather reverse that, what I mean when I say focus on the next thing to do in your process, in your plan, in the overall plan, or when you're doing a response. If you're in containment, your job isn't to worry about how you're going to fix it later. Stop the damage now. Stop the potential for damage now. Stop the potential for future damage later. Contain the problem at hand. Resolution, work to fix the problem that let it happen. I'm going through this because I've memorized it, but then I have a couple that I'd say, oh, that was a good point. What was it again? Yeah, chaperone the plan as well. It's not just that you're going to be focused on the next thing you're doing when you're doing it, but recognize when your incident coordinator perhaps is treating this as a list of checkboxes and they're kind of tired, they don't want to be there that day, they're looking at vacation in the next week. It's not a list of checkboxes. Keep them focused on why they're doing it and recognize what they're putting into it. Get them energized about how they're helping it. If you make this an iterative, positive process, you hopefully will motivate people to see the change they can affect on the organization and draw from that. A little bit about my history, my background. I used to do Global 1000 consulting and do pen tests all day long. And I got started in that, and the first 5 or 6 were a blast. I was breaking into corporate networks, taking out credit card numbers, root accounts. Wow, this is, you go through a few more, it's like, this is kind of scary. 10 or 12 in, you're going, oh man. And you go past that and you realize everybody's got the same problems, They're all failing in the same way. And I just started doing this. I shouldn't be this successful. What's the problem here? Now, this was maybe a decade or so ago. It's hopefully improved a little since then. I got out of that destructive, I'm digressing. My point is, I got out of that destructive attack-only mindset because I wanted to see not just my career grow and my checkbook account grow, but I wanted to see the things I help have input to, where I turn in a pen test, and I'm afraid I see a pen test as a political tool. That's a sales tool, because it shows them you got problems. Hey, you got mail. It's a tool to get the consultants to sell them more services. You want to do a real threat now, so I'm really getting off the side. I wanted to see where the input I have wasn't just ignored or didn't go into a black hole. I wanted to see it built. Get your guys to help build the process, build the program, and focus on why they're doing things. And it is not all about you. After that last tirade, yeah. It's not all about you. You aren't always going to be the incident manager. A vacation is a terrible thing to waste. I want to go home at 5 today, please. I want some sleep. Make sure that you have somebody who knows this as well as you do. Make sure that you've got a deep skill set when it comes to your subject matter experts. Make sure that somebody can replace you, because you're going to continue doing good and being rewarded for it. And God knows where that leads. Do a good job of finding your next replacement, because you'll move on to other stuff, hopefully, if that's your direction. Work to completion. I've arranged all of this stuff for our response plan in a way that it's the minimal necessary to get to the next step. But if you skip a step, if you don't work to completion, your response will fail. Even if we get all the way to resolution and you don't finish that summary response, your sponsor, executive, impacted parties are going to think you're asleep on the job because they never find out what happened, why, or what fixed it. And you'll never improve your plan either. If you don't finish and work to completion on each of these, your response is not complete. And finally, reuse the stuff that works, not just stealing process documents or pulling them out of NIST or any of the other resources I'll have up here in a second, but recognizing other groups have a different response process they already use. Maybe your fraud department can help you here. Maybe your DR guys know a thing or two about when bad stuff happens, what to do. Hopefully they don't test it. Well, hopefully they don't have events often. I won't say hopefully they don't test it. Maybe you've got risk analysts in a financial services company. You've got them. They're somewhere. I know they're hiding under rocks, but if you find them, they can help you understand when you're doing risk analysis, you're really focused on not the impact that you think is happening because you just saw 12 routers go down, but that's a chain of 12 routers going to one extranet that you're not using right now. The financial impact is not so big a deal, and they can help you understand beforehand how to do financial risk analysis and really drive what you're doing better when you're reporting it back up. They're saying, hey, that was a good call. You didn't have to go and spend another $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 on consultants because we were going to save 20 or weren't going to save any at all. Good way to shoot yourself in the foot. Thank you very much. My contact and some resources for this is up here, but I'll take questions. Sorry, Riverside.
Got another one for you.
Yeah.
After building a plan, a lot of the plans that I've seen are 50 to 100 pages in some cases. They're
Yes.
really bulky. They have a lot of detail. They have a lot of depth and breadth. They go into the who's, the what, where, when. Have you boiled that into something that's a little bit kind of a getting started guide for new people that are coming in, or do you just make them troll through all the data and try to understand it? How do you approach that?
Here's the quip answer, then I'll give you the real one. I was coming to a talk that I'm focusing on preparation, and then I forgot something. I have the model plan. It's a stack of paper about this big in a manila binder that I was going to bring in and offer to share with people after the talk. I've forgotten it. My apologies. But to answer your question, it depends on who you're bringing in to answer the question specifically. If they're an incident responder, it's their job to sit down for the next 8 hours, however long it takes them, to become really familiar with that plan, because that is their job. If you're talking about subject matter experts, it's probably a good idea first not to come up with a plan you think is too involved. If you are the one who's got responsibility for incident response in your corporation and that plan doesn't fit the need, it's the wrong plan. Or if it does fit the need, but not for every subject matter experts, come up with just a list of the stuff they need to know and make that their training package or familiarity program or thing they get a gold star on at the end of the week when they sign off of it and do a quick test on the wiki. Whatever it is, make sure it fits their needs. There's a lot of work to be done in fitting needs here. All of this preparation pays off. It's 80% of the benefit. It's 50% of the work. It's 80% of the benefit. And I measure that by financial, by the way. Your response is going to cost a lot of money. Your preparation is going to cost a lot of money. It's worth it in the preparation phase, to your previous question. And you had a question too?
So when your list of all the people you needed to help coordinate with and get in together with your plan, you only listed internal folks.
Largely, yes. Building relationships with a multitude of external agencies, if you're talking about local law enforcement or this sort of thing, first is unlikely to be your task. Even if you are the person in charge of incident response in your corporation, you are probably not going to be given the authority, unless you build it over years in respect from your sponsors, to directly contact law enforcement. It'll be a lawyer's job to make that call. You make a summary to them, and maybe it's chief counsel, maybe it's the HR counsel, maybe it's your chief compliance officer. They're going to be the ones who say, okay, your local contact for the FBI is agent so-and-so in so-and-so.
It depends on your organization and what...
If you're already the government, I don't have the experience to speak to the question.
Sure. So to help hedge yourself, if you are in a .com world, getting involved with InfoGuard and getting to know these guys will help you immensely when you are dealing with an incident at 3 in the morning and Agent Bob Smith comes in. You already know him from last 6-8 months. It works to your favor in coordinating and working these sort of stuff out than Agent Bob Smith walking in, taking your server and walking out.
I don't quite agree here based on some experience. Let me lay it out for you. I know of a situation, not necessarily in the company in which I work, where someone did have a very good relationship with a local PD, and they had a guy who was absolutely gunning, great guy, wanted to do digital forensics. He stepped all over the FBI, took a server, and ruined the chain of custody. I understand. But my point is, the call wasn't made at the incident responder level. It was not made by a lawyer. It wasn't made by somebody who say, that might not be a good idea, don't come in here. The call was made by, if I remember correctly, local business management who really weren't empowered to make that level of decision. And it botched chain of custody and really caused a lot of problems there.
So my guess is that they didn't follow their incident management plan.
Yes, or whatever was established in proper process. It's the example I have. It doesn't perfectly match the question you've posed. I recognize that. But yes, definitely, where you can build those relationships, for my purposes, for our corporation, we had, I think it would be more cost than it was benefiting us because we happen to be nationwide, we're brick and mortar, and I would have to know the contacts for every FBI office, very resource cost, low return.
So that particular financial services, you have a lot of laws to govern what you don't do in these cases. But more informally, there's a lot of value in knowing your local FBI guys. I found that in Seattle, they'll talk to you about hypotheticals, so you know what's involved before you formally call them in.
Okay.
And that's part of building a relationship and knowing who they are and knowing what the impact is going to be of making this a criminal case rather than just an incident.
Yeah. To my experience, the regulatory side and all the different regulatory bodies are significantly disjoint from the response side with local federal law enforcement. There's not much correlation. Question?
Yeah, so you actually mentioned it a couple times in passing, but I think it's something that's very key. Training.
Yes.
It's really important in your documentation phase not to just document this stuff and put it up. You actually have to make sure that people need to use the information, are required to take some training or required to look at it, maybe do a test, something like that, because when it's 3 in the morning, they don't know what the hell's going on.
No, there's no time for a book. I completely agree. Every time I've mentioned skill sets, it means that you need to select individuals in your response team who can act. and act right then. And if that means you have to skill them up now, you do. If it means that there's a training budget as part of incident response, and you've got that authority, make it part. It'll be your responsibility as well, and you'll be expected to deliver. Did I see another question? I saw.
Well, actually, we're out of tape.
Oh,
Anyway,
I'm
so
sorry.
we should be
All
going.
right. Well, if you have any other questions, please feel free. Hook up with me after this, and I'll be happy to talk to you. I talk way too long as it is. I've actually torn through this and lost a lot of details, so you can get me going for another couple hours if you want. Thank you.